I stand outside the Tureta Tower, standing amongst many, the starving masses, looking up at their cruel god, and she cares not. The High Mage looks down on me and my own, and she does not care. I swore, for a moment, I heard her voice carry across the wind, "It's just how things are. It's just good business." A famine had befallen all of Omnia, the ground growing tough and crops withering away before maturity. All peoples were suffering, save for the rich and powerful who had amassed a hoard of preserved foods. Flemuria fell into a war over the limited supplies they had left. Kookaburra focused on fishing, despite the seas filling with slime, and my continent of Richu simply seemed to decline. Within Richu lay my country of Reba Endo. Within Reba Endo lay the capital, Tureda City, and within that city stood myself and the many others pleading for food. We are poor. We are starving. We are without aid in the streets right outside the gates of an oh-so-powerful company, the Mages Guild. This was their Reba Endo branch, one fort in the great empire that is their multinational conglomeration, the shining tower of the capital age. And in crisis, they thrived because these mages had developed a magical technology that was far beyond the elements, surpassing alchemy, the pinnacle of thaumaturgy. They had created a machine that harnessed immense energy, mana from the deepest wells within Omnia, and transmuted crops out of thin air. Unlimited food in a time of famine is a miracle, and yet in this capital age, it was bought and sold to the highest bidders. All nations bowed to the rule of the Mages Guild. This was the way of things, but it didn't have to be. My beautiful country, eroded by the climate and abused by the system, it simply cannot sustain itself in this way of things. The heads of state were granted food for loyalty, coin for favours, and power for their souls. They survived, even living lavish lifestyles, as the people they ruled over were granted next to nothing. Only those whose labour could be exploited were cared for, and even they were granted as much as they needed to keep on working, while the rest were expendable, a statistic in the eyes of their cruel business overlords. I looked up at the High Mage, president of the Unitary Mages Guild, visiting for some reason or another. She looked down at us, mine and my own, and she cared not. I'm no one to her, just some peasant. My name is Kato, but she'd never know that. I look up at her and I wondered what led her there, to be so cruel, to value gold and power over the lives of living human beings. If I were in charge, things would be different. I suppose it was that thought that might have started things. I was a teenager, still growing and developing, and at that moment the winds changed. It was so easy to know what I had done, like I had a new sense that felt it, and I was suddenly filled with hope. I had magic. I was a magic user. I won the genetic lottery, perhaps inherited, perhaps something hidden in my lineage, perhaps where I was born or who I interacted with, perhaps it was just luck, but the power was now in my hands. I could be a mage. Mage Kato. I left the crowd. I was useless to them as I was now, unlearned in the techniques and unknowing of the spells. I couldn't lead a revolution alone. I needed to be more powerful to do that. I revealed this privilege, this usefulness, to the institutions around and was accepted into a place of learning, a university under the Mages Guild. Years went by, learning, practicing, developing, empowering. I was taught the techniques of alchemy and the history of the guild. I learned the intricacies of spellcasting and the economics of managing a business. I understood the reality of nature, human, social, and economic, and I mastered how to handle the power I had and how to attain more. I would better this world. One day, I saw the machine for the first time. It was beautiful, a grand contraption littered with runes and reaching deep into the ground. Around it stood 100 mages, those who didn't do so well in their education, but were skilled nonetheless, and they cast constant spells operating the great machine. I looked down, and my eyes could not see the bottom. Miners, non-magic workers, dug below the machine, allowing it to reach even deeper to suck of more of that great energy needed to transmute the crops. I could feel the energy through it. It was overwhelming. Half a second of the energy soaked up by that great beautiful beast was more than 1,000,000 mages could bottle in their entire collective lives. It was truly awesome. This innovation was extraordinary. I was working with the gods, and the gods knew my name. What an honour. My position was elevated further as I worked under the Mages Guild. I could do little alone from the bottom, but if I helped the way of things, then I could reach the top, and then I alone could change it all. I was still young when I reached the position of food distribution. There was a lot, enough for the poor people I once belonged to. But if I did not manage it in a profitable way, I would never climb the ladder, and nothing fundamental would change. I followed orders and directed it away from those who needed it. I couldn't afford to feel guilty. I had a job to do, and one day I would change the world. I met with head of state for Reba Endo, and those who acted like kings before now seemed to grovel at my feet. I recalled the injustices they perpetuated, the injustices they still perpetuate, and I had no sympathy for them. But I had a job to do. Legislative change. I demanded certain new liberties for my branch, small changes in taxes, the curtailing of unimportant rights of the workers, and my higher-ups even granted my authority to demand some new land for myself. These were acceptable losses. The workers still had some rights, and I had been working my whole adult life so far for a good cause, so I deserved some land out of it. You get what you earn. You don't pass up on such opportunity. That's the basics of business, the basics of human nature. Anyways, once I'm in charge of things, I can undo these things. I can set it all right. The heads of state before me agreed to my terms and thanked me for my graciousness, and they turned to balance things out, cutting funding to key services to make up for the loss of taxes and displacing peoples to give me the land they agreed to. For a moment, I felt angry at them, hurting those below them, but then I recalled my role in their actions and my intent behind it. It will work out in the end. Anyways, not everyone could win. And if I were not here, someone else would have demanded the same, and even without the Mages Guild filling this space, the officials would probably have done the same anyways. It's just the way of things. My office was elevated, higher up the tower. I made more sacrifices for the cause as I rose. Eventually, I attained the role of Tenno Mage, the highest office in the Reba Endo branch of the Mages Guild. Now, everyone in my country knew my name, and I was starting to get noticed and even paid attention to by the higher-ups in the conglomeration. The name Kato was starting to mean something. I could see the bigger picture now. The shipments of products we got could, hypothetically, feed the whole nation, quite easily too. At first, I was disgusted, but then I came to understand. To give it out for free would mean to lose all means of making money. Setting up homeless shelters to give out food would only attract those who had already eaten, and what's to stop other companies from abusing this to collect most of the food, and then, when we do start to run out, they would turn around and sell it. The Mages Guild would make nothing, I would lose my place, and the system would return to how it was, and I would have achieved nothing. So then I thought, perhaps selling it at cost value, but no, the mages who operated the great machine wouldn't work if they were paid any less. And without them, there would be no product at all, and the miners below were already paid the bare minimum needed for survival, and if my branch were making significantly less than the others around the world, we could be shut down and I'd lose everything. I considered limiting my own income, but that would only decrease the cost of their products by a little, and why should I suffer to save a few pennies of the many? They have done nothing, and I have done all this work to get where I am to try and help them. They should be grateful, but they gathered outside the gate in view of my office and only cried. I stood atop the Tereda Tower, and I looked down at the struggling people below. Just wait, I thought. It would all work out, but they didn't seem to understand. Once, as I worked in my office, an organised riot broke out, led by protesters. It stretched far across the city, even destroying many of our ships. I was angry. That set us back quite a lot. We needed those ships to prosper. If our branch is shut down because of poor sales, Reba Endo would never get any of the food they need. I was helping them. Sales within this country were higher than they had ever been. That was good. It meant more people were eating well. I was the good guy, and yet they tried to sabotage me. I wasn't at the top yet either. There was still the High Mage who decided how much products I received, what my wages were, how much control I had. I was weak in the grand scheme of things. I just needed more time. But the ignorant masses below didn't understand. They hadn't gone through what I had. If they were like me, we could be in this together, but instead of leaving the crowd and doing what I did, they sat, did nothing. I could let them risk my operation. I gave the order to my subordinate to restrict their rights to association, to organise in groups that are a risk to the state, as well as increasing the funding of our authorities, cracking down on these risky actions by the unemployed lowlives without nothing else to do with their lives. The decades had passed. The famine still persisted. The products were still sold, and I had proved my worth, my loyalty, and my strategic mind to the Mages Guild. The successor to the High Mage was to be announced, and it was around that time they came to me. I had worked well into the night, and the moon beyond my window was hidden under clouds. I worked by candlelight. My co-workers came to me, good friends, good people. They had lovely families, and they too were just doing what they had to, so that they and their families could survive in this world. I had my own family at this point. I understood. They came to me and spoke honestly. I stood to greet them, and we went for a walk. I carried the candle with me as if it were a torch, illuminating our path forward. In this light, they told me the truth. I had heard rumours, mostly from protesters and activists, from disobedient heads of states and opportunistic whistleblowers, but I never really believed it. This great famine, that began when I was but a child, was no natural environmental catastrophe. It was a consequence of our magic. Not individual magic. That would have no significant effect. It was the power of the great machines. The life force, as they poetically called it, was being drained from the planet, and this resource was needed to maintain the climate. The original mages knew this but went ahead anyways. This famine was our fault, and it would only grow worse. The seas were turning to sludge, the air growing heavy, the forest would catch light, and the skies would soon turn red. It was a scary thought. They told me only the highest officials knew of this truth, and since I could be becoming the High Mage, I should know. They asked what I would do, knowing this, if I did become the High Mage. I thought for a moment. The world was dying because of us, because of this system. We were killing the world. But if we were to stop now, who knows how long it would take the climate to fix itself, if it could fix itself. And stopping now could mean all our food may not last us as long as we need for the land to be arable again. Other companies could jump in on this technology at any time and make a profit off it, continuing to destroy the land while we made nothing. We became nothing, and I would have destroyed the corporation I had worked so hard to improve and fundamentally changed nothing. Not to mention how my subordinates would react if I were to declare we were to make no more profits, to become a charity focusing on fixing the world and eventually shutting down. There would be a coup. I would be ousted and would have done nothing. Even a slow move towards change would damage our business. Investors would see a trend and get skittish. The stocks would suffer. Other companies would jump into the market, supply the demand, and all the economies we essentially have full control over would collapse. I lowered the candle from my face. The path ahead illuminated even clearer as I hid the shame from my eyes. I kept walking forward with them and told them it would be business as usual. As the High Mage, I had a company to run. It was a dog-eat-dog world. In this capital age, I couldn't give our competitors any room to thrive, or it would be the end of things. People were fed. Sure, not the masses, not the unemployed or the poor or those who needed it the most, but the competition gave me an opportunity to sell for cheaper to make their smaller businesses unsustainable, which meant, statistically, more people had access to food. I was, as High Mage, doing good. I was philanthropic. I gave away a small portion of my income to charities across the world, which made it easier to convince the rebellious peasants that I wasn't the evil monster they thought I was. Not that they mattered. From my experience, all the lower classes ever really did was get in my way. They were useless, uneducated, poor and starving, and if they just did something with their lives like I did, then they wouldn't be in their situation. The world is better. Any injustices are just natural problems in a system such as this, and to risk making any fundamental change to that system could entirely collapse it, and then no one would profit. We may not be able to continue down this path. I understand that. But I won't back down until I have to. I won't lose out on all that profit while others get in on it. If I don't, they will. And then I've helped nothing and only lost what could have been mine. This is the way of things, immutable and eternal. As technology improved, so did our output. And eventually we were making enough product to feed the world's population twice over. We even had plenty profit that if we did distribute to the entire population, we'd all be rich. We could end world hunger and eradicate poverty overnight. But that's not how you run a business. Where's the profit incentive for that? In fact, it shows great restraint to not do that. I'm not giving in to base human urges and am instead focusing on fixing the world through the systems we have. Mass poverty and starvation is just a product of the system, and there's nothing I can do about that. You can't fight every battle. Being in charge means making the difficult decisions, like incinerating 30% of the product to ensure the price is high. It's called manufacturing scarcity, and it's very effective at running a business. Some could even call it magic. My name is High Mage Kato, and this is my success story. In my old age, still the High Mage, I returned to Ripa Endo on business matters, and I looked down from the highest floor of the tower. Masses of peasants had gathered, as they often do, and I judged them as statistics. How many could I starve to both maintain a survivable population and limit the number of mouths I needed to feed? I finished my calculations in an effective period of time and submitted my orders. This would be the last time I'd ever need to step foot into such an impoverished, ugly country. I hear a commotion below. The mob had become unruly, seeking to destroy the way things are because of some foolish ideal that they could do a better job. I step back out into the harsh polluted air and I see a riot. Quite brave for weak mortals within range of my security's weaponry. I remind myself to order the heads of state of this little country to criminalize such gatherings. That'll fix this problem of people coming together so easily. I hear a bell ringing. My ride has arrived to leave this waste of a land. But first, one last look. I stand atop the Tereda Tower, standing alone, the rich ruler of this world, looking down at the insolent mortals. And I do not care. I whisper to myself, it's just how things are. It's just good business.